All of the Real Talk interviews are now available in one place, categorised into topics. Some of them even have bonus downloads, so jump on over to our site and check them out. The link is in the description below. And I really want to give a big shout out to Adam who's joining us tonight. The guy's, some of you will know him, but you know, a huge events business, and he's been really commentating, watching the economic markets for, I mean, I've been following his stuff for the last probably 18 months, and you know, I'll let you explain a bit more as we get into it, Adam, but I really feel like your opinion will be a lot of value to the people in this group here tonight. Your understanding of not only economics, but you've been through a recession yourself before with your business, with your properties. So yeah, so look, hey, so welcome, Adam. Thanks to have you along.
Awesome, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, so hey, do you want to maybe just start by, for those that maybe don't know you, just a little bit about what a little bit about your business, a little bit about yourself, and we'll sort of take it from there.
All right. Okay, so dropped out of school in 5th form. Pretty much mucked around for a number of years doing all sorts of stuff, mainly in the hospitality industry, as well as going to lots and lots of awesome house parties on the shore, and just kind of being pretty social around Auckland in general, which is how I built up a pretty significant database before I got into the business of throwing parties. I actually used to work at Pulp magazine back in the day selling advertising. I did hospital and all that, and then when I was 21, I went and started working at Pulp magazine, and decided to get my life on the right track because I was getting into a bit of mischief before then, and worked there and realized quite quickly that at the time I was only on like 35 grand a year plus bonuses, and I was pretty much running off petrol fumes, and I started doing events while I was there, and they said, look, this is a conflict of interest. Your events, you know, heaps of our advertisers now want to sponsor your events, so you can either stay here and earn breadcrumbs, or you can move on to something else. So I took the punt on going off and started my own business, and started my own magazine actually, as well as doing the events. But then I realized that after the first couple of years doing the magazine, it was quite a passion of mine. I really enjoyed it, but at the same time didn't make any money, just took up a lot of my time. So the events was also a massive passion of mine, and something that we were really good at. So I decided to turn that into the business and go ahead with that. Second year, was maybe the third, I think it was the second year of business. We were doing really, really well. And then we did one event which lost about $90,000. So back then it was quite a lot of money. And so that was a bit of a hit quite early on. And it was the best learnings I could have ever had, to be honest, you know. And remember, I had no qualification. I did do a sales and marketing course at university, night school, but just a year course. It wasn't anything major, but everything else I'd kind of failed over the years or just dropped out. I had no interest in going and sitting in classrooms and learning that way. I just like to learn hands-on. So the $90,000, yeah, it was a massive hit, but it was some of the best learnings I could have ever gotten out of that. And since then, it's definitely paid off. From making the same mistakes again.
I totally relate, mate. I didn't even finish school, so you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's not for everyone, and I tell you, look, if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, then you know you've got to go through all the process and all your school years and university and all that. But you know, entrepreneurs, man, you don't need to go to school. You just need to find something you're passionate about, and they're going to get real world experience, you know. And so anyway, we did that, and we've built ourselves up in the game. You know, we've done hundreds and hundreds of events now. We've been in the game now 17 years. We've just finished diversifying actually, and changing our direction. We did a lot of parties for a long time, but I've actually tried to navigate away from parties into more of those experiential based sort of boutique festivals. So instead of doing heaps of these parties everywhere, we're doing less events now, but the ones that we do are pretty amazing. So we successively navigated out of those. Last year was our pivot that we finally managed to get into that space. We've got 3 events: Fiesta del Sol, which is still more like a party event experience sort of thing. So we kept that one. It's about 16 to 1800 people. Highlife New Year's Eve Maracana. Went back up there, did a really cool thing at Ascension Wine Estate, and then we've got our Sunsetter Festival, which used to be the Takapuna Food and Wine, and we just rebranded that to Sunsetter Festival for the first time this past summer. Sold out event at Smells Farm, but just over 4,000 people there, which was really good. And the reason why we rebranded that was because I didn't want to be restricted to a Takapuna name. You know, if you ever have to move the festival, we want to keep it at Smells for as long as possible, but if we want to move it, we're not stuck to Takapuna. If we want to produce another one in another part of the country, we can. And when we're dealing with acts and sponsors, it's more of an international sort of vibe and feel about it, and so you get it bigger.
Yeah, totally. Totally makes
it attracts more opportunities to the festival.
And so you've been obviously commentating and obviously running your own investments for quite some time as well.
Yeah, so I started property investing in 2003, and to be honest, for the first 8 years or so, or maybe 10 years, depending on how I look at it, probably the first 8, I just had, I went with the mainstream sort of way of doing it. I had no idea. My mum actually got me into it, funny enough. She was like, you got to get an investment property. And I bought one just before we lost all that money, but I still held on to it. And my mum at the time was like, oh, you got to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and all these kind of books. And I never did. I wish I had it back then. I probably would have been a lot more successful. But I did this investing and I got quite lucky. At the time I had quite a bit of money, but I was just throwing it around and didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about anything back then. Interest rates, you name it. I just kind of went off the guidance of my mind. I didn't want to learn. I was just partying back then and spending a lot of time just traveling and just doing whatever. But it was when the GFC happened, I bought like a property in March 2007 and I locked myself into an 8% interest rate, for a number of years. And if I had known what the climate was and had educated myself, and whatever, I would have probably made a smarter decision, So we all know what happened not so long after the March 2007, later on that year, the GFC started and interest rates started dropping and whatever. So look, I was in a position where I could ride it out. It's still, and it was, most of the property was negatively geared. So I got the tax gains, but we're still and we ended up selling and making a slight profit. But I did look back on that and I was thinking, you know what, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I reckon that if I can educate myself on this stuff and, start getting into, schooling myself up on things, and I'll be able to,
be better in the future, right? Yeah.
When it comes to property and investments and stuff. And I've made mistakes since then, but remember, without making mistakes, there's no progress, and you learn off your own mistakes, you learn off other people's mistakes, and you move forward. But in saying that, I've made very little mistakes compared to what I could have, and I've had way more wins under my belt when it comes to investing, So it's been a long road, but we had some big wins. When I could see where the market started booming again in 2011, I was trying to tell people then, actually, I think this is where things are going to pick up. And back then people were like, oh, no, the market's going to keep dropping and this and that, and, whatever. And I was like, no, I think this is it. And I was doing my research on the ground and whatever. And we managed to get, some really good buys running through, and we were buying all the way up until, 2016. And then I actually just ended up selling. We sold off all our investment properties, kept our home property. We sold our last investment property off in November. So, because what I could see on the horizon with this downturn that was on the way. But I had no idea that it was going to be a virus triggering the downturn. I actually thought trade wars and Brexit and everything else going on. And we're in a global economic downturn for 3 years now that a lot of people don't actually realize that we've been in a global economic slowdown. And I'll go into that shortly, but yeah.
Yeah, I think exactly that, just watching it, and it's been a perfect storm for such a long time, but there hasn't been a catalyst or a anything to kick it off. And my thought was it was always going to be a currency risk with the constant quantitative easing that they've been doing. But then this has happened and just put the brakes on everywhere, and it's changed it completely, right?
Yeah, it's a really mixed situation. It's very complex to try and keep tabs on. I'd have to say for the last 7 years, I've been watching the whole global economic situation almost every day and so many pieces of media. And I got, quite addicted to it at one stage, and it's paid off, man, obviously, but it's, you got to spend a lot of time to get on your finger on the pulse and educating yourself on what's going on. But yeah, I actually thought that, I've been saying to everyone since pretty much early 2017, look, I believe a recession's on the way, blah, blah, blah. But I underestimated at the time the low interest rate environment and the quantitative easing and all the artificial, crazy acts by central banks and governments to be able to kick this can down the road. And I said, we were very close to actually going into a global recession last year, just from, the trade wars, Brexit. We had smaller financial crisis events popping off in Venezuela and Lebanon, and you had the Hong Kong civil unrest that was dragging on for months. It tipped Hong Kong to recession, and we had Germany, dipping in and almost going into technical recessions, all this, and that was just off for all that stuff. So I was like, okay, cool, this is what's going to cause it. But then all the central banks rushed in, used up a
Saved
lot
it
of
again.
their firepower, and started doing all these emergency rate cuts last year off that, which gave this sort of little artificial boost. It was almost like giving the heroin addict a bit of morphine to keep them going. And then so that gave this it turned everything into a bit of a super cycle, which kind of pushed up the stock markets more, brought a bit of life back to the Australian and New Zealand property markets and other property markets, and gave everyone the sense of, oh, actually, look, we're getting out of this global downturn, and here we go, and blah, blah, blah. But then next minute, this virus thing comes along as a black swan event, not to mention the oil dramas with OPEC and stuff. So, those two things were, but mainly obviously the virus thing was the big nail in the coffin and the trigger that sent everything south. And a lot of people will be using it as a bit of an excuse on why everything's not.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was already in a very fragile situation. So,
And when you look at the virus that we've got, it really it is kind of like a 1 in 100 year event. A lot of people have been comparing it with Spanish flu, and I guess obviously we've got much better medical function than we had back then, but we've still got a risk of a virus that's spreading that's an unknown, and we've still got a risk that it's going to take time. It's not going to be over in a month. It's going to take time for that risk to be spread out over the whole planet.
Yeah, and that's what people are underestimating. What a lot of people don't realize, right, is that it's not like we're going to get through this 4-week or 6-week lockdown and everything's going to go back to clockwork. And I saw some of the Westpac economists coming out saying, okay, cool, we're going to have a few more months of negative growth and then things are going to start picking up at the end of the year. And I have to disagree with that. And to be honest, out of all the economists, a lot of the New Zealand economists, they've always got this blind optimism sort of thing going on, or a quite an optimistic thing. They'll put out their forecast and they'll downgrade it, and then they'll put out the next one and downgrade that. And then, I guess it's how they have to operate anyway, because they all work for banks and they want to keep people lending or whatever.
Keep their job too.
They've got some good commentary, but I always find that they're just a little bit off the mark and whatever. But anyway, this is how I see it. I see that, we're going to have these, obviously we're going through the shocks at the moment. It's not just, we've got multiple shocks out there. This thing here, in my opinion, and many obviously top economists out there as well, and every commentators and stuff, but what we're seeing now is that this thing here makes the GFC look like a Sunday picnic. It really is. We're having multiple shocks. So you've got obviously the supply and demand shocks that we're having. We've got the oil shock, but the oil shock is a separate sort of thing which can have systemic risk on all those people that are highly geared, the US shale producers and all that, and blah, 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 that can't produce, it's not profitable for them to be able to produce, barrels of US crude or whatever at $20 US a barrel.
Not making any money.
It's crazy. It was only at $60 US not so long ago, But there's that, but there's also the supply and the demand shocks. You've got the fare shocks, you've got the travel shocks. Pretty certain we've got the economic shocks and stuff. We actually had like a bit of a credit crisis, liquidity sort of situation.
It was looming, right?
Banking, lending markets and the repo markets in the US and China. And that actually started in September. So remember, some of these financial things that were blowing up in the system happened before any virus came along, which is what a lot of people don't understand, So right now the central banks are coming out and they're throwing the kitchen sink at this thing to prevent all this stuff happening, but it's just putting band-aids over brain hemorrhages. So I think, what we're seeing is that they've got short-term solutions, but they don't have a long-term solution here. And unfortunately, their actions are just going to, like, let's just say New Zealand, for example, the Reserve Bank. So they've come in and obviously, and the government, right, with all these bailouts. So the Reserve Bank has come out with quantitative easing now, which is going to try and shore up a bit of liquidity into the system, make sure that our interest rates don't spike through the roof because there's different pressures on those. And then, the government's coming in and obviously the Reserve Bank's cut to almost, cut the interest rate. They didn't really have much to work with. They used a bit of it last year. They cut it by 75 basis points this year. Just to give you an example, when the GFC hit, over a number of months, they dropped it by 575 basis points, right? So
there's
we've got
nothing left.
500 less basis points this time around to try and, you know, resurrect the economy with, and property market and everything else. But so, you know, with this scenario that we're going in, you know, there's definitely a bit of less ammo here and there, depending on how you look at it. With the government bailouts coming in, you know, all the stuff that they're trying to, you know, all this funds that they're giving people, that's all great. But all it's doing is it's not going to stimulate the economy. It's just going to keep a roof of, it's going to stop some companies collapsing, going to put a roof over people's head, keep food on the table, and keep some people employed. But what are they going to do in 3 months' time, 6 months' time? You know, and all of this money that they're pumping out, we're going to have to pay that in higher taxes later on. It's not a free lunch. So when we do go into a recovery stage, we're going to have that holds us back a little bit as well, because our taxes are higher, because we've got to pay for the emergency stuff now. But in saying that, they had to do it, because if they didn't, we'd see massive all these other issues and whatever. So yeah. But anyway, so I think that going back to my point, sorry, I could be talking all day on this, and I don't want to, you know, go off track too much, but the shocks that we're seeing, because there's so many different shocks here that are unraveling, not to mention just a lockdown shock in itself, and you freeze economic activity in a country, right? You know, these things, once it's lifted, and it may be 6 weeks, you know, they say 4, but it could be 6 or whatever. There's so much of an escalating sort of snowball effect of this thing already, that's putting a lot of businesses, so many people are getting made unemployed already.
Yeah, we talked about the
jobs,
travel guys.
So we've got that thing that impacts us, but then the restrictions after this. It's not like we're going to open this up. Okay, guys, the virus is gone, everything's back to work, let's get pumping. It doesn't work like that. So there'll be restrictions across a lot of industries, and social distancing and all of that. And then if we have any flare-ups or whatever, they're going to have to stay on top of those too. We might have to go back into stricter conditions. I know in our industry, I'm not looking at, you know, I don't think we'll be able to do any events anytime soon. Hospo is going to be taking a bath from this. Tourism, you know, the migration is going to be significantly restricted.
Huge.
People coming to the country, same as the borders. They're talking about maybe 12 to 18 months. You know, and look, all of this can reverse if they can get a vaccine out fast enough for treatments, but that's going to take some time. So for the foreseeable future, with all these restrictions in place, that will really have an impact on the New Zealand economy. That plus sentiment, plus the fear, you know, and even when it does get going, you're still going to have these people that are scared of the virus, others that are going to watch their wallets. So that's all the stuff we have to deal with, you know. And so that's why, at least when the GFC happened, yes, we had a tightening of credit, but people were out there spending stuff.
Trying to make it recover.
But they could still do stuff. We have got so many limitations on us now, it's not funny, you know. Not to mention already the job losses and everything else that we're starting to see globally already dwarfs what we saw in the GFC, you know. I mean, the US lost, you know, over 3 million jobs in 1 week last week, you know. So then we've got the global stuff to worry about too. Remember, the US has been off the ball. If you look at their reaction compared to what China did, they are so far off the ball on this thing, it's not funny. So I think something's going to blow up there that's going to cause even more headaches for the global economy. And with all these other places in lockdown or with restrictions, you know, that's just messing up the whole supply chain, the demand chain, you know, all of these different things. And so we can have economic impacts from that, you know. Good news is that New Zealand's a food producing country. You know, there's a lot of wins that we're going to get from this, but we are going to get, our importers and exporters for now are going to get hit. And there's other things that will be, you know, we're definitely going to feel this more than you know, last time. But there are positives to come. So
I was just going to say, let's talk on some of those positives, those opportunities. The you know, we've slightly touched on recovery, but you know, with all of this comes a lot of opportunity. The opportunity to pivot, the opportunity to change your offering, the opportunity for you know, cheap investments, cheap businesses. Well, so yeah.
This downturn's long overdue, right? And every time we have a downturn, I think this is going to be the one that really gives things a big clean out, right? Everyone's going to get hit by this, but it's all about, you know, there's great opportunities. I think the first bit of it, right, that all business owners need to get ready for, and households, is just the survival play, all right? You need to work out a strategy on how you can survive this thing, not just survival from the virus. I mean, if you get that, who knows what could happen? Most cases are mild, but some people can pass away. But it's not just that, it's I don't want to make a joke on it, but it's survival on, you know, just a business front. So getting through this thing, because it's way tougher than the GFC. in my opinion, I think this recession is going to be a lot longer. And I think that the recovery is going to be longer. I also, last time the global recession was 18 months. I think this one here is going to be longer. Some countries will recover quicker, others won't. But and there is risk of a even worse case scenario with that. But so the recovery is going to be longer. So you need to position your business to be able to ride out for a longer term thing. And the most important thing is that, get your mindset ready for a longer recovery and a strategy for that. Don't go, okay, cool, this is only going to be 6 months or a year, because I think it could be longer. So if you can set it up for that and set up a strategy for that, then the best case scenario, if it does recover earlier and everything starts coming together earlier, then that's just a bonus, Another thing you don't want to do is freeze and just be like hiding in your shell, go, oh my God, the sky's falling, like, and whatever. You need to make sure that you're still relevant, you're still out there on people's radars, you've got key messaging to your clients, you're informing them, and you're not just dropping off the face of the earth because you're hiding in your bunker,
That really reiterates what the call that I had yesterday. We basically outlined a survival plan for these small businesses, things you got to do, the communications you got to have, and how you can pivot, so it's bang on the money, Adam. Thank you.
Oh, definitely. And you also just need to, obviously a lot of people are going to be doing this anyway, but you need to look at all your costs. You need to be realistic about the profit that you're going to make. Like we are as a business, I'll tell you, like, just to give you an example, right? We're in events, right? We do festivals. Well, government already has a restriction at the moment, 100 people, no events over 100 people. They might even tighten up even further or whatever if this thing gets worse. But, that's going to get, maybe released to 500 when things get a bit better, and then this and that. But we already have to get in the mindset, okay, when we come back to produce events, I'm not going to be coming out of the ballpark here and trying to do a 4,000 person event. The 4,000 person event I used to do for Sunsetter is going to we have to aim for half of that, or 40% less people or something, and rebuild that event over a number of years. Because not only are we going to face all the government restrictions, and that's if we can even do anything this summer. I mean, I'm still, I think it's going to be tricky if we can even get something like our November events off the table. We're trying to see if we can try and do something on New Year's, something in February, but it just depends on where this goes. We don't know. So the thing is, for everyone, depending on your business, right? You need to forecast that. There's some businesses in this environment that will absolutely thrive, right? So if you're doing hand sanitizer or face masks right now, or even certain food and stuff, you can actually do really, really well out of this, But for businesses like mine, I have to be realistic, and I have to, do that. And I also have to renegotiate all my contracts and stuff. And you may have existing contracts locked in out there, guys, or whatever, but you have to go back to your landlords. You have to go back to the people that you do business with and say, look, if you still want to be paid, if you still want to, if you still want to have a tenant, or if you still want to have this or that, you're going to have to give us a break. Otherwise, you could be sitting here empty. So would we rather have someone here still doing business with you and giving you some, giving you half the pie rather than none of the pie,
Yeah, totally.
So it's things like that, renegotiating all your contracts. Also, not just that on the financial side, on that aspect, but you also need to renegotiate your contracts when you go forward. So because of the risk of this thing, if we have flare-ups and you get sent into the, we have to go back into lockdowns, whatever, you need to set up some sort of contracts with your whatever business you're in, so you don't get hit with this,
the lease problem doesn't come up again.
Like our stuff, right? For events, for example, we're going to go back to a lot of our providers and say, look, this is the deal. We can give you this business and whatever, but if for any reasons there's cancellation beyond our control, because we can't get insurance for this now, then we need to have some sort of flexibility there on, any potential fees or this that we have to pay. And everyone's going to have to look after each other and try and massage this and mitigate everyone's risk. Everyone still has overheads to pay and this and that. There has to be some kind of, give and take sort of thing there. And that's how we all kind of move forward, on that side of the thing.
Yeah, totally, mate. So, hey, look, Adam, we've chewed up 25 already. I guess maybe if there's any final point you wanted to make on opportunities.
Look, I tell you what, once we get through this thing and the recovery starts, a lot of your competition, a lot of people, a lot of business will be wiped out from this. So you can get yourself into a ballpark where you can really, grow and do some big things. So it's just about holding in there. You have to do everything you can. Don't give up. Just go hard and just do whatever you can to just keep going thing. No matter what gets you down, you just got to keep going, guys. Like, I can't tell you enough. There will be blue skies at the end of this, and it may not seem like that now, but if you can hang in there and just make sure you tick all the boxes and hold your heads high with integrity and just go forward and do everything you can, you will be able to get through this, And the opportunities on the horizon are going to be major, because I'm telling you what, after the rest of this, New Zealand is a great place to be right now. Imagine trying to ride this thing out in Wuhan. My neighbor's actually still on lockdown on Wuhan. That's another story. But if you're trying to ride this out in the UK or this, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to move back to New Zealand. There's a lot of overseas capital that's going to be coming back into this country as well, that's sitting on the sidelines. And I tell you what, the boom after this is going to be pretty big once we kind of get there. But you just have to ride out that storm. So all I can say is just don't give up. Do your homework, constantly review all your stuff, and just dig in for a longer ride than usual, and make sure you have a laugh along the way too, because we'll all need a few of those.
Yeah, and maybe a couple of glasses of wine.
Oh yeah, or a couple of bottles.
Awesome. Hey, awesome, Adam. I really appreciate your time, mate, and thanks to everyone that's given up their time tonight to have a little listen to our chat. So we're back tomorrow.
All good. Much love to you all. And remember, we're all Kiwis. We're all great country here. So don't give up. Have a good one, guys.
All of the Real Talk interviews are now available in one place, categorised into topics. Some of them even have bonus downloads. So jump on over to our site and check them out. The link is in the description below.